Now, welcome back, Visionaries. Usually, I don't show my face, but for this movie, I'll give it an exception because this movie, there is so much to talk about. Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. Look, I like Zack Snyder as a director. I think he has his positives, he has his pros, but there are also cons to him, especially in story level. When it comes to the story of his movies, his ideas are there, his ideas are really cool, but the way he executes these ideas, that's a really big problem. And with this movie, I thought this could be a big improvement from the first film. Don't get me wrong, the first film was terrible. I didn't like it at all. But this movie, I thought there could be a way to redeem himself. Maybe a way that, this could be better than the original. Like Dune. Dune Part 1 was more of laying the foundations and the groundwork, and Dune Part 2 was a cinematic masterpiece. This movie, I was hoping that that was what he was trying to go for, with Rebel Moon Part 1 being like laying down the foundations and the groundwork, and Rebel Moon Part 2 will be the real action, the real Part 2 where we actually have the better part. But it turns out the opposite. This is worse than Part 1 in a lot of ways. Yes, all the problems that persisted, that stayed in the first movie, was also here. All those problems, especially with characters and writing, it's just way too much problem. But that's not all. I was hoping that maybe he could give us more pros in this movie, but no, there are way much more problems than the first film as well. So it's a very problematic film. In some ways he did improve it. Like, there were so many cool cinematography shots. When it came to the first movie, I was really disappointed when it came to the cinematography of the film. Zack Snyder is a director known for great visuals. But in the first Part 1, the visuals were terrible, honestly. But in this movie, it was a huge improvement. The visuals were great. But as that's expected of a Zack Snyder film, everything else was terrible. Honestly terrible. Let's get to the proper review. Here's a quick plot synopsis. After the first movie, after the first part, all these warriors, these 6 warriors or so, came back to the village to help defend the village. First, they start by harvesting the crop before the Empire comes in to take them, and also they also trained the farmers there to fight with the Empire. Now that is crazy. There's some 7 samurai influences here, but here's the thing. You're fighting an intergalactic empire with farmers. That should not be possible at all. The scale is way too big. That makes no sense, first of all. But again, the visuals were great. Both the farming scenes and the execution of the action scenes. And then a full-blown war happens between the Empire, the whatever they call themselves, as well as the farmers, the peasants. Now, all the characters, all the main characters especially, are all one-dimensional. There was this one scene where all these characters sat together on a table and they talked to one another and they told about their past. And that's all there is to the character. After that, you're supposed to like the character, connect with the character, but what? That's all there is to them. There isn't anything more for us to like or connect with the characters at all. So that was a huge disappointment. The action scenes, I'll give it to them. The action scenes were fine. They were great. But sometimes it just gets a bit too corny. It just gets drawn out way too much. Especially the last war sequence. That sequence was so long. Action scenes usually excite people, but when they overstay their duration, people get bored of them because it's the same thing for an elongated period of time. There isn't anything more to keep the audience hooked into the movie. That's the case for this movie. The war sequence was way too long for us to actually be engrossed at the entire sequence of the film. So it should have been shortened and there should have been more storytelling involved in the movie. And as expected of a Zack Snyder movie, there's a lot of slow motion going on. I'll be honest, the slow motion worked for me for the most part. There were a few sequences with slow motion that felt a bit too corny. It was just stop already, please. Work on the story more. And I heard this movie is getting a director's cut. Why? That is so unnecessary. That is not needed at all. This movie was very terrible and you want to give it a director's cut. Nobody's asking for it. The romance between our characters, Korra and this other guy whose name I've forgotten, was way too forced. In fact, I said that in the first film, a lot of moments in the movie was too forced. Here as well. And the stakes are way too low. Like, the entire battle was for a farm. Like, what? Really? You're fighting for a farm and the harvest? That's all there is to it? Why? That makes no sense at all. Then how's the CGI? The visual effects were all great. I'll give it credit for that. Then there's the robot thing. Don't even get me started. Look, the robot has some cool visuals. I'll give it to them. When it comes to robot, the cinematography is great. Especially there was this one shot where the robot was standing in front of an army. But my question is, why did he come into the war so late in? Why didn't he join earlier? Like, there were so many moments I was asking myself question. Wait, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why didn't this happen? Why didn't that happen? And the reason and the backstories they're giving us to fill up the lore of the universe, the lore of whatever happened, how the king died, why exactly the king was killed, why Korra ended up here. Some of the things just don't make any sense. And now the next movie is about going to find the princess who is supposed to be dead. I know she has some magical powers or something, some special powers to her, but what? It's all just so messed up. There's no central theme or topic or idea in the story at all. It's just so messy, which the first film had a problem with as well. I'll give it that. But the first film, it was even more messier. Here it's messy but not that messy. Because of the Empire, they all lost something and so they want to fight for it. I get that. But they're all the same one-dimensional characters. Couldn't you have taken inspiration from something else? Like added in some other thing? Maybe take another character, create another kind of character? They all feel the same type of one-dimensional characters. Then the entire harvest sequence. There was... Okay, the visuals were great. I'll give it credit for that. But there was... Why? Harvesting is not part of the story, main story at all. They spent too much time there. And they spend too much time on the war sequence. Like, you need to understand there is more to an action movie than just action. You need to understand that. More to an action movie than just visuals. What is the film about? What is the story about? What are the characters' motivations, their backstories? Give them more. Make them more less one-dimensional. Let them have many dimensions to them. Let them be a bit more complex. Okay, there's nothing wrong with a bit more complexity to the character. And the action scenes, think of something more creative. Think of something else. Like, don't just have people just shooting blasters at pew 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 at each other. It's so boring when it gets to be so long. Think of some other ways you can go with the action scenes. Please. This is a space movie, right? Where are all the spaceship actions in space? You could have gone there. And there are other forms of actions that you could have gone for, but all you did was just fighting for one farm? What? That is so beyond ridiculous. Alright, the story is just so beyond ridiculous. Other than the story, what else is there? It's just straight up boring. After like the first half, after half of the film, I just started scrolling up my phone. It's like, what? Did people actually like this movie? I went to look at Rotten Tomatoes. I look at other reviews and nobody seemed to like this movie as well. It is just straight up boring. You can't keep it just ruins your attention span. It's just that bad. And you can't say the movie is too long. That's why people don't have enough attention span for the film. That's not right. In fact, there are way longer movies out there with people loving them. So the problem is not with the attention span of the audience. The problem is with the movie. When you have so many boring stuff in it. So many things that we have seen 1,000 times but dumbed down. You're underestimating your audience. Something that will make them think more or things like that. It's just so unnecessary. It's just so ridiculous. And the main bad guy was supposed to be this emperor who's this Korra's father. He was not in the movie at all. The movie was just... The main bad guy in this movie, once again, throughout the entire film, was just Noble, the general again. Huh? Him? Just him? Like, this movie sucks, man. I already saw this guy in the first film. Why do you want to bring him back for the entire movie again? Maybe for I was hoping that they would keep him for the first 10 or 15 minutes and then they'll move on to another different villain to spice things up a bit. Someone who's a different kind of villain from Noble. But no, they're all just the same. Why? What? Why? Okay, among all the characters, among our main 6 characters who are there, I found like one side, a few of them quite interesting in this movie. One of them being Titanus, the leader who lost his soldiers, as well as the female assassin who lost her child in war. Those are the only two characters I felt had a certain level of engagement to them that were at least entertaining, let's just say. And one of those characters were the first ones to be killed among all our main cast. Bro, what? At the end of the film, there should be more emotions to it. They tried to add in emotions, but it just, the movie was just straight up so boring up to that point that you can't feel any emotions for the characters. I'm not gonna say Zack Snyder is a terrible director. He's a great director who knows how to create great visuals. Alright, but those visuals, like, what are they for the film? How do they support the film? The visuals need to support the story of the movie. What story is there in this movie? There is not much when it comes to the story of this movie. So the visuals, he was hoping that he could elevate the visuals to attract the audience, but no. And this is not just the first time Zack Snyder's movie had this problem. This is a recurring problem in many of Zack Snyder's films. I think Zack Snyder has to look at all these criticisms and think, what can I do to make the story more interesting? Look, this is a wasted potential right here. Netflix gave Zack Snyder the opportunity to make two movies, where the budget of the movie is millions of dollars. Another director would have killed to have this opportunity, but Zack Snyder got it. You would expect him to make full use of it, but he didn't. That is the problem. Netflix could have entrusted this project to someone else, and that someone else could have done a much better job, but they gave it to Zack Snyder and he failed. That's the thing. Zack Snyder needs to wake up and look at all these criticisms of his past films and learn from them. Just learn these criticisms, especially with the story. What's the central idea of this movie? You say it's an inspiration of Star Wars, but this is not how you make something inspired by Star Wars the right way. There's a way to make a movie like that. Look at Dune. In fact, the Star Wars movies were inspired by the Dune books, right? So in a way, you can say that the Dune movie took some inspiration from Star Wars. That movie did very well because the story was really good and really enticing. This movie is... What's the point of this movie? Another director would have really killed to have this opportunity to make a movie like this, but once again, what a failed attempt. Look, Zack Snyder, he's a fantastic director, just that he needs to buck up on the story, the dialogue, right? Most of my problems are with the script. The dialogue was very cheesy. There were times when they were saying, yes, together, we need to prevail. Guys, let's fight for the farm, for the freedom, and things like that. These very generic lines. The lines in this movie are very, very generic. I finished watching this movie just an hour ago and I've forgotten all the characters' names except for a few. Like, they were trying to make the action scenes as cool as possible, but it just became so much the opposite. There were slow motion scenes that became like, okay, this shot should be really cool. But they were overdoing it, they were doing it too much that it got cringy at times. It was so bad. And character decisions at times. Look, I know that sometimes when characters don't make dumb decisions, the movie would have ended way sooner. Like for Avengers Infinity War, for example. If Star-Lord didn't punch Thanos' nose, sorry for that pun, we wouldn't have an endgame. I understand that. We wouldn't have an Avengers Endgame. So I understand that characters need to make dumb decisions at times for the movie to prolong. But in this movie, the dumb decisions the decisions made were just straight up horrible. Then don't get me started on the fact that we didn't get much world building from this movie at all. Like, literally, it's a farm. There would have been so much more potential with this movie. This movie had so much more potential, but all we do is spend time in a tiny little farm in a planet. And that is so... What a wasted potential, man. When the movie ended, I was so happy. I rejoiced a bit. Said, look, I love movies, but I was so relieved when this movie ended. It was just so bad. I can't find, other than the cool visuals at time to time in this movie, from time to time in this movie, I couldn't find anything else that could redeem this movie to be a good film overall. This is a damn disappointment. I don't even know what's going on anymore. We have so many bad movies. We have good movies, but we have so many more bad movies recently. Madam Web, The Marvels, now this. What's going on? Like, Hollywood needs to buck up. They need to learn how to make good movies. They make good movies, but they need to continue that. Like Dune or Oppenheimer, they need to make movies like that more. Honestly, I'm gonna give this movie a 4 out of 10. This movie is damn straight disappointing, honestly. There are some redeemable things like the great visuals or whatever it was, or whatever else there was, but other than that, there isn't anything much. So yeah, if you like this video, click the like button. If you want to see more stuff from my channel, and see you guys next time. You guys are always the best.